Romans 1:16-17 stands as the doorway into Paul's unfolding revelation of the gospel. These verses are not merely a declaration of personal courage or religious zeal. They unveil the power of God manifested through the finished work of Christ and the unveiling of a new covenant reality. Paul says he is not ashamed of the gospel because it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone who believes. The gospel itself is the power. Salvation is not presented as a future possibility dependent upon human effort, religious striving, or covenant performance. It is the announcement of what God has already accomplished through Jesus Christ. The death, resurrection, and exaltation of Christ brought the old covenant age to its fulfillment and opened the way into a completely new order. The phrase, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek, reflects the historical unfolding of redemption. The gospel first confronted Israel because the promises, covenants, temple system, priesthood, and prophetic expectations belonged to them. Yet those things were shadows pointing toward Christ. Once the substance arrived, the shadows were no longer the focus. The message then flowed outward to the nations, revealing that righteousness before God would no longer be identified through ethnic distinction, temple worship, sacrifices, or law observance. Paul declares that in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith. The righteousness of God is not primarily human moral achievement. It is God's own faithfulness revealed in Christ. Jesus fulfilled everything the law and prophets anticipated. The righteousness that humanity could never produce under the law has now been freely manifested through him. The expression from faith to faith carries the idea of an entirely faith-based covenant from beginning to end. The old covenant operated through external regulations, repeated sacrifices, priestly mediation, and continual reminders of sin. But the new covenant rests entirely upon trust in what Christ accomplished. It begins in faith, continues in faith, and finds its completion in faith. Paul then cites Habakkuk, "The just shall live by faith." In its original context, Habakkuk spoke during a time of covenant crisis and judgment upon Israel. Paul uses the passage to show that true life has never come through the law itself, but through trusting God's provision. This becomes especially significant in light of the transition between covenant ages occurring in the first century. Throughout Romans, Paul addresses the passing away of the old covenant world and the establishment of the new. The destruction that eventually came upon Jerusalem and the temple confirmed that the age centered around sacrifices, priesthood, and the Mosaic order had reached its intended conclusion. The gospel announced not merely personal forgiveness, but the arrival of a new creation reality, where believers are fully accepted in Christ apart from the old covenant system. Therefore, Romans 1:16-7 is more than an introduction to doctrinal teaching. It is the proclamation that God's covenant faithfulness has been fully revealed in Jesus Christ. The law could expose sin, but it could never perfect the conscience. Christ accomplished what the law could not do. The believer now stands righteous before God, not through performance, but through union with the one who fulfilled all things. The gospel is powerful because it announces completion rather than postponement. It reveals a righteousness already accomplished, a salvation already secured, and a covenant already established through Christ himself.